Hi everyone, thank you for joining us for this masterclass with Andrew Coppin to discuss how we use storytelling to create more compelling media outreach for our businesses and can help our PR efforts. Like many of us, Andrew had a successful corporate career, which he left to set up his own business. And Andrew is the co-founder and director of My London Voice, which teaches the tools of applied storytelling to help people become more authentic, confident, and engaging speakers. He's also founded Andy Kopp's Storytelling after spending many hours volunteering on weekends to work with children in storytelling, which was the start of his journey to tell stories to people of all ages. He's very passionate about people about all walks of life, and he relishes the opportunities to listen to their stories. Hi, Andy. Welcome and thank you for joining us.
Hello, Karen. Yeah, thanks very much for the invitation. And hello to all your members.
Yeah, thank you. So let's kick off. Andrew, can you just tell us a bit about your background and how you got to where you are now?
So, I'm originally from South Africa. I often tell the story of coming to the end of my time at school. And I remember having a conversation with my dad, and I said to him, Dad, I have no idea what I want to do for, even going to university or even for a career. And my dad at the time was, he really struggled working part time and studying, I should say, studying part time. He wanted to become, he trained to be an accountant. He was a lawyer before. And he said to me, well, my boy, if you do chartered accounting, it'll give you a great foundation in life. So I went off to university and I spent, a few years, I should say, a couple of years too long, because I think I dabbled in a few other, went in different directions. But to cut a long story short, I ended up qualifying as a chartered accountant and I moved to the UK in 2001, and then I spent the next 20 odd years working. Well, I've worked in a variety of technology and financial services companies. I worked for two failed investment banks, so I've got Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns on my CV,
Wow.
and then I worked at JP Morgan for 10 years. And it was during my time at JP Morgan that I was running a working families network. It was a diversity and inclusion network. And we created this network to help working parents because I was finding it was a real struggle to, you know, care for my family. Didn't have anyone around us. We're doing it all ourselves
Mm.
and trying to figure all that out and all the psychology that went with that. And we started this group. And it was during that time that we ran that group that I invited a speaker to come around and she did a talk on the science of storytelling. And I was gobsmacked because she had everyone in the palm of her hand like this for the entire session. Hardly, there wasn't much of a PowerPoint anywhere. It was just her on stage, and I thought, what is this magic? I want to know more. And that was really the start of my journey into the world of storytelling.
Okay, it's a bit like how we are already now, riveted to your stories. Okay, Andy. So then, why are stories important, and why should business owners use them?
How, if I asked you this question, or I ask this to anyone that's listening, how long have we been using WhatsApp or PowerPoint or even email for that matter? I mean, email probably we're going back to when did it
Yeah,
become more
gosh.
commonly used? Was like what, the early 90s probably.
Yeah.
Right? And if we then think about that and think about how reliant, even PowerPoint, how reliant have we become on PowerPoint when we do presentations and we talk to an audience? However, if we think back hundreds of thousands of years, humans have been telling stories around the fire as a way of educating one another. It's the oldest form of education is storytelling. So it's hardwired into our brains. So it's instinctive. And it's fascinating when I hear people talk about going to an event where the CEO of a company stands up and all he does or she does is share case studies and anecdotes. And what they're doing is they're just telling stories. And everyone comes away going, what an amazing experience. And this is the power of the story. And, to ask that question, why should we be telling stories? It works. It really, really works if it's done in the right way. And that's what I do. I help people to actually get over the fear and anxiety of standing up in front of an audience, because that's the most important thing
Yeah,
first, is
absolutely.
preparing yourself to do it and giving you that confidence to do it, but then helping you shape your narrative so that it works and you're respecting the story. So, and I'll tell you something that's closer to my heart is thinking about, families that have lost loved ones, especially over this pandemic, and people have, there's been a shock. We've lost people and we haven't been able to prepare for that. And when we lose people, they're gone. And the stories and everything that's a part of them is gone too. So another thing that I love people to think about doing is recording their voice and recording their story. So, the power of your story and you telling your story in your voice, that is what I strive to do.
Okay, I like that. So when you talk about getting your stories right and doing the narrative, do you have any tips for how we as business owners can do that ourselves?
I have
Sure, you have many.
I have three rules actually when it
Okay.
comes to sharing a story. And the first one is respect your audience. It's knowing who your audience are.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit like identifying your target market. Well, what are they actually wanting? And even if you're talking to a live audience, there's also bearing in mind that that room is going to comprise people of different temperaments and personalities. And that's important to know. So you might be a person that loves detail, or you might be a person that likes to just have, you know entertaining PowerPoint slides and quite whizzy, but that may not resonate with your audience. Or you might be pitching or talking to an audience and you haven't even prepared for them. You don't even know what they're actually wanting. So I think there's a great deal of homework required in preparation and planning before you actually share the story or plan for the story.
Yeah.
But the other one, obviously respecting yourself, mentally and physically preparing yourself for doing it. And then there's the story itself. What is it? Are you respecting that story? Are you giving it the time to put the effort in to research your subject, to actually bring it together, to practice, and also deliver it in such a way that you are providing an experience to your audience? Now, I should just I think there is, when you ask me to talk about a story, I think sometimes people often look to me and think, oh, so you're a copywriter, or you're a writer, you're an author, you're a journalist. And I say, well, actually, there is a great deal of writing required in preparation, but I work on my scripts in a totally different way to an author would, or a playwright would. I don't type out a script. The
Yeah.
thing about storytelling is you are using your mind's eye. So you are inviting your audience to come in to what you're seeing inside your head, and you're just describing what you see. So we don't necessarily, you can plan, but you won't necessarily follow that script word for word. It's not, there's a huge difference between a storyteller and an actor.
Yeah.
But the big thing is we don't read. And this is what I think is amazing. So right now I have no notes around me. And I think there's a huge difference between someone reading a story and someone telling a story. And I think this is the
Absolutely.
huge distinction.
Yeah,
Yeah.
completely. I mean, I'll be honest, even just doing these videos, a lot of the time, like I'll read the bio and I'll read some of the questions. And I'm very conscious of it because I know, like now, while I'm talking to you, it's a much more natural flowing conversation, right? And then it's a lot more engaging as well. Um, but just to quickly say as well, the principles that you teach is exactly what we teach in PR. You have to know your journalists. So what we teach is that you create your target list of journalists that you want to reach out to. So you've got to do a lot of research to find out who they are. And then you've got to build the relationships with them and respect them. So instead of just doing it on stage, for example, or in a group, you're taking the time to build those relationships with them on social media or by emailing them, etc. And then the whole visual side of educating people, informing people by using visual examples. So, for example, when I was doing the launch of UK payments on a couple of years ago, the CEO, who was our spokesperson, demonstrated that you could make a payment on your mobile phone in one hand because he was holding his toddler on his hip with his other hand. So he didn't even need to press any buttons. That moment was almost like a light bulb coming on for him, because when he realized that by sharing his experience in a story, it then resonated with our audiences, who then were like, oh, it's actually really quick and easy to use that. So it helped people to understand how things worked. So I'm very much about teaching people how to use that visual element. So when you talk about that in your storytelling, it's very aligned.
You've just made me think, I mean, the power of infographics. And people put too much in presentations, and I think people will sit through a horrendous presentation and be wanting to rub broken glass into their eyes. They're just thinking, no, this is too painful to bear. And then they go back to their desk and they go, oh, I've got a presentation to do tomorrow. Oh, I wonder how I should prepare this. Well, let me just use the standard template that the company uses now. And I think this is where people come to me, yeah, but we have to use PowerPoint. And I said, I know, because I worked for a company that we did used PowerPoint for documentation, for reporting, for presentations, etc. And it was always the same thing. And I always say, you don't need so many slides. You do not need so many slides. You can have one or two speaking slides, and then just give the handout to everyone and say, you can deal with this in your own time. Because the reality is that if you put too much text into your presentations, you end up finding yourself reading, or you say silly things like, I'm not going to read that. You can read that yourself. I'm thinking, well, why is it in there?
Yeah.
Why are you putting that in your presentation? You have not planned for your audience.
But also then I find that the audience doesn't listen because they're so busy reading.
I have this in the world of storytelling. Well, in writing, one looks at archetypes. And I often think about PowerPoint as being the villain, right? PowerPoint you have to be in control of PowerPoint. Otherwise, PowerPoint is going to be in control of you and your audience. And what it does is if you are not in control of PowerPoint says to your audience, please take out your phone and go on Facebook, because the speaker is going to be really boring. And I jest, but this is where I think I come through, and I say this with my clients, and they laugh and they giggle because they know, right? So I say to them, do not dismiss the power of PowerPoint. If you need it for your operating procedures at work and the way you do things, I'm not telling you to change that in any shape or form, but plan your presentation or what you're talking about. Plan and practice, and make sure you're giving your listener an experience.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. The more you practice, the more comfortable you become with what it is that you're saying, and you're less likely to make mistakes, which is what people fear doing. So yeah.
Oh, I love, Karen, I love it when you start talking about fear, because I get this so often, people talking to me, oh, how do I overcome fear of public speaking? And the first thing I say to them is very much like, around the instinctive nature of storytelling. It's hardwired in our brain. Fear is normal. Fear is normal, and you accept fear in your life. You just say, right, fear, you're not in control. Right? Excitement and bravery are going to be in control. I got the idea of that. I should give credit to Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote the book, The Big Magic. And it's a fantastic read. And there she talks about, just bringing creativity into your life, but also how you manage fear. And I looked at that and I thought, the psychology around that is so simple. But if you say fear is normal and it's instinctive, it helps us with survival. Well, what's my coping mechanism for that? And that's what I sort of say, people, just be brave. Come on, do it. Let's see how it goes. And then of course, working in a group, having a peer group, working within a group of trusted friends and colleagues that you can share and experiment and get feedback.
Yeah.
And that's so yes, practice, but practice with a safe environment where you can actually receive feedback, but also record yourself, listen to yourself, look at yourself. And the more we do these sort of things, the more we get used to it. And that's why I say to my clients as well, record your voice. And they go, oh, I don't like the sound of my voice. And I'm going, well, it's totally normal.
Yeah.
It
is. And I remember that.
Ask you that, Karen. Do you know why we don't like the sound of our voice?
No.
So from the earliest age when we started making a sound, we would hear ourselves from two sources of sound. So there's the sound that comes from, well, the sound is created in our voice box. And
Yeah.
the sound, there's two sources. The one, obviously, out our mouth, and then around and into our ear, our outer ear, to the middle ear, to the inner ear. And then there's the sound that actually is transmitted internally. So there's the internal sound that goes from our voice box through our blood and tissue and bones straight to the inner ear. So you've got the outer ear and the inner. So you've got the external sound coming through from our outer ear, internal sound hitting the inner ear, and the two sounds come together and you get this wonderful blend, this harmonious, soothing, reassuring voice that we know all too well. That's us. And then we listen to ourselves on a recorded device and you go, no, that's not me. It's higher pitch. It's not familiar. And if something's not familiar, we tend to reject it. But the beautiful thing is, I'll say to people, no, that is your voice. Go and record yourself and listen to yourself all the time. So that I think is the big thing. People getting over the sound of their voice, but
Yeah.
it's not getting over it. It's falling in love with your voice. And the way you do that, just record and listen, record and listen.
Absolutely. And it gets easier every single time you do listen because you do, as you say, you do start falling in love with it. Well, at least I have anyway. It's the only way I've become comfortable with doing these videos. But also, I mean, now I just use voicemail on voice messages for ease of convenience rather than having to type long text messages and things like that. So yeah, it's definitely, I 100% agree. And that's one of the things that I teach as well in media training is practice looking at yourself in a mirror, listening to yourself, recording it. If you can record yourself and watch it back, you can then, and they do that in all the media trainings in London as well that I've taken CEOs and all our spokespeople to in corporate world. You get recorded answering a journalist's interview, and then you get it played back. And every single one of the spokespeople absolutely hates themselves on video. But the more you watch it, the more at ease you become with it.
Yeah.
And that's the way of the world now anyway. So just conscious of time, are you able to give a couple of pointers then to my members about how to think about crafting some of these messages or how some of these stories then? Where do they start?
I mean, there's a wonderful saying that you do not know what you know. It's a strange saying, but everything's a part of you. The stories are in your memory, in your subconscious. Everything, your life is full of experiences and events that have happened, and it's all a part of you. It's all in there. But it's hard today because we just consume so much content, and our lives are very, very busy, and we don't even stop and pause. So I do try to get people to break away, go for walks, try and do something that will get you to escape from your desk or what you do. And the important thing is get into a habit of journaling. So I have this little black book that I write things down in. And yes, one could say it's a diary, but I try to have a separate book from my diary. It's a book that I can reflect on. It can be thoughts, it can be ideas, it could be events that have happened, or it, giving me ideas around a subject to talk about, or it could be an anecdote or even a case study, in its infancy. And so I do strongly encourage people to keep a record, build your repertoire of stories. Start to build your repertoire. I mean, it sounds very much like what stand-up comedians do. They have to put their scripts together and they have to write all this stuff down. And I encourage you all to, encourage you and your members to do that. It's just your stories are a part of you. They're your stories. Now respect them and do something with them. And you'd be amazed when you start to capture all the stuff before you know it. Oh my goodness, you might have a book in the making, very, very easily.
Yeah.
And I think that's the starting point is just giving yourself the confidence that you do have great stories. Everybody has great stories to share. And the beautiful thing is, as we are all human beings, and as I said, storytelling is exceptionally instinctive. It resonates. It has a power to connect with other people because we are humans, and there's going to be somebody out there that your story is going to resonate with.
Yeah.
Then of course it comes to, well, how do I actually, okay, then what do I do? And it's again thinking about, well, who's your audience? What do you, I'm not going to go to a corporate event and go there and spend an hour telling Grimm's fairy tales. I mean, it's not going to happen. But what I can do there is think about, well, what is the audience? What are they wanting? So as an example, we're working with uh, the it's a generation group that is the millennials and Gen Zs in the workplace, and we're doing talks about sharing experiences of my career in financial services. So there I'm looking back at real practical experiences that happened to me, for example, during the credit crisis when I was working for Bear Stearns. And Bear Stearns was, the one bank in the world that was really highlighted as the one that one could identify as the credit crisis trigger back in 2007. And I was all there, and that I was experiencing all that. And I look back at it quite fondly. But these stories are important, but no one's really talking about those stories because we just keep moving on and we're moving on. And yes, let's think about something that's very common right now. What is a very, very common subject for people to talk about is, I would just say, lockdown. Tell me your experience of lockdown. And it's amazing when one does that, because people just get, oh, well, let me tell you my story. And their story is going to resonate with others. The challenges of working from home, the challenges of perhaps having children at home and trying to do your job, the challenges of trying to care for elders in the family that you can't see, and all the challenges of working in a house share. I mean, a good friend of mine is an architect. He went around to a house share, and 5 people in the house, all professionals. One was working in the bathroom, one was working in the stair cupboard, because they all needed their space. And it was incredible when you listen to these stories, how it resonates. But I think that for me is the important one, is, think about your stories, your case studies, your experiences, and start there.
Yeah, it's really, it's even just as you're talking, I can even think from a PR perspective how that story about the people working from all the different rooms would have made a great story for the press, right? Because that kind of unusual story is what they love. And it's, there's so many stories a business owner has to tell, but often what happens is they don't think it's a story. So, because you're so busy you doing that, you just don't think that anybody else would be interested in hearing it. When actually, if you dig into that a little bit more and focus on what's behind it, actually people do want to know about those. But also what sometimes happens more in the corporate world is that everybody thinks everything they do is a story. And then as a PR person, you have to always bat them off and just say, actually, that isn't newsworthy. So, and this is why for me, storytelling is such a crucial part of doing your own PR, is that you need to be able to determine what is a worthy story for the news and what isn't. But you've got to have the story to start with. Otherwise, you can't do anything at all.
Yeah. The one thing I will say, someone said to me once, because I was asking the question, their response to my question, should storytelling be used in business? And he said yes, but only if it's done correctly. And and by that, I would even add to that, and comes back to respect the story, because the power of story, especially the short, repetitive story, is very, very dangerous. And we've seen that just through politics. If we think about let's make America great again, or even thinking about campaigns that are used in the UK around, let's even think about Brexit, for example. The short narrative that's repeated time and time again, it induces emotions. And this is what stories do. It induces the oxytocins, it induces the endorphins and the dopamines, and then the endorphins make us smile. The dopamines is what gets us really, fixed and hooked, and we will remember that. And the oxytocins are the one that make us really build that bond and that trust. And people know this, and they abuse it and they misuse it. And I find really disrespectful to the power of the story when people are misusing the power of the story, because you're getting your audience to emotionally react and not consciously react.
Yeah. No, with great power comes great responsibility, aka Spider-Man. And no, I completely
Absolutely,
agree. Yeah.
absolutely. I totally agree with you.
Yeah. And it's such a good point about the emotion, because that is what the stories do, is that that's all what it's about. It's about creating that emotional connection for your audience so that they buy into you and they then come back to you. They know, they like, they trust you. Yeah, completely. And also they pick up your messages that you're trying to share.
I mean, I'll share with you. I'll just demonstrate really shortly, just the power of, you know, the oxytocin is that my wife and I, we have 3 children, and when we came to the UK, we decided we wanted to be hands-on. We did not go down the route of asking for help within the household. We said we can do it ourselves, both 2 working professionals, and it's been really challenging. And I would even say my eldest now is 18. It still is very challenging, but incredibly rewarding.
Mm.
And I remember when my wife, we had our 3rd child, and I'll never forget this day. I came home from home and I was excited. Hard day in the office, coming home, going to see the family. I walked in through the door and all 3 of the kids were crying. Lauren, my youngest, had just been born. Was a few days that Claire was at home now with Lauren, and it was holidays, and the other 2 were running around the house. And I walked in and I just saw Claire. She was in tears as well, and she said, "I don't want this baby anymore." And you know, it was a wake up for me because I didn't really fully understand postnatal depression.
Gosh.
And that for me was, you know, it was like a smack in the head. And I didn't know what to do. And we managed it ourselves. You know, we managed it ourselves. But if we had spoken about it and we were confident enough to share that story with friends and family, more than likely someone said, you need to see someone.
Yeah.
And this is where sharing stories is so powerful. If you can find that person you can trust and confide in and share a story, you often find that the person, if they are listening correctly to understand and not just listening to respond. I mean, there's nothing better than as a listener to just sit and listen. And that's often what people need when they're telling a story, is to tell a story and you just be there
Yeah.
to listen.
Yeah.
Um, but
Absolutely. It just removes the stigma. And actually, the more you share your stories, the more you actually find other people might be going through those same things and can also, like you say, point out that you need help or share their stories as well, so that you realize you're not alone. And actually, everyone's just keeping really quiet about this issue just because maybe there's no forum to talk about it. Um, but yeah, if you know and trust the people to open up and share those stories, yeah, I'm so sorry your wife went through that, just to
well, I wanted to share that deliberately because that really does, you know, it. I've told this talk to working family groups in companies, and I think it's very important because what I'm trying to do is to share some vulnerability as a story, generate those oxytocins, but
Mm,
also encourage other people to think, you know what, that happened to me, and slowly but surely, as we've just said, you know, it starts to build. It
completely.
gives people the power to go off and do something, right?
Yeah,
Leads
absolutely.
to action.
Yeah. I mean, this is just, I have loved this conversation. Um, I'm conscious of the time as well. And I think we've taken up quite a lot of your time. And I know that you've got a busy day ahead. Um, just last question is, Andy, how can people get hold of you to find out more about what you're teaching and to delve into this a little bit more if it's really piquing their interest? It's definitely got my interest.
Well, people are very welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. So linkedin.com/in/Andrew hyphen Coppin, Coppin,
Okay.
and also our company website. So, short little funny story. We named the company after our intended target market, which was London. So our company name is My London Voice, but London has really become, this has now become more of a metaphor for the whole world because there are so many spoken languages in London. And now we have clients all around in various parts of the world that I've worked with. And yeah, it's just, we're not going to change the company name. I quite like it. And people
Well,
can
I
go
like the
on there. They
story
can
behind it as well.
yeah, I mean, there is a story behind that, and I sort of like, no, I'm not going to change it. I'm going to leave it. But I do have events on there. I run a popular 4-session program. So it runs for 4 sessions, and I offer a variety of different times because people are in different places right now. I think routines are all over the place. I don't think people necessarily have the set routines,
Yeah.
and I'm very happy to accommodate and work with people. And I'm hoping we can get back to doing live. I do all my sessions on Zoom. They work wonders. I mean, they work great. But I am really looking forward to hopefully we can get back to doing stuff live and do weekend retreats and things like that. But
Great.
shall wait and see.
Yeah.
But yeah, mylondonvoice.co.uk is
Okay.
probably the best place to go, and connect with me on LinkedIn as well. That would be amazing.
Cool. Well, I'll put the links in underneath the video on the platform as well, so people can access it there too. Andy, thank you so much for your time. I have loved talking to you. You've given us some really useful insights and tips, and there's a couple of things that you've actually even triggered some thinking for me to offer some more insight into my training as well from the media training side of things. So thank you for that.
Only a pleasure, Karen, and thank you so much for the invitation,
Yeah,
and thank
pleasure.
you to all your members.
All right. And I will obviously be in touch with you again in the future.
Thank you.